The wind howled, a raw, biting symphony against the tin roof of the hunting cabin. It mirrored the tempest brewing inside me. Chris's phone, held out like a venomous snake, displayed a profile picture. Laura. My Laura. But not my Laura. The woman staring back at me had the same smile, the same glint in her eyes, but it felt wrong. Like a perfect forgery. Look at this. Chris's voice was low, gravelly, a stark contrast to the usual jovial tone. Found it on some new, exclusive site. One of those discreet ones. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the woods. I snatched the phone, fingers trembling. The profile was meticulously crafted, every detail echoing my own life. Seeking a man who embodies strength, kindness, and a touch of familiarity. The words were laced with a sickening sweetness, a parody of our own love story. Someone who understands the quiet moments, the unspoken desires. Phrases I'd whispered to her in the dark, now twisted into something grotesque. Nausea churned in my stomach. The air in the cabin, thick with the scent of pine and gunpowder, suddenly felt suffocating. I remembered the dinner last week, the way Laura had looked at me, a soft, almost pitying smile. I'd mistaken it for tenderness. Now, it felt like a cold, calculated observation. We'd been talking about a second honeymoon, a trip to Italy to rekindle the flame that had flickered in recent months. I'd felt the distance, the subtle shift in her demeanor, but I'd chalked it up to stress from the community project we were both involved in. A project that had forced us to spend a lot of time in each other's company, but also around a lot of other people. Chris, his face etched with concern, placed a hand on my shoulder. This isn't just some random affair, man. Look closer. He pointed to a section of the profile, a list of specific, almost clinical, attributes. Rare genetic markers, I read aloud, my voice a strained whisper. Specific blood type, certain bone structure. A chill ran down my spine, a primal fear that had nothing to do with the freezing wind outside. Laura wasn't just seeking a replica of me, she was hunting for a genetic match. A perfect specimen. I recalled the way she had asked about my family medical history, how she had insisted that I get checked out for a few things. At the time it felt caring, now it felt like a calculated information-gathering exercise. Chris, a man haunted by his own failed relationships, shifted uncomfortably. This feels off, he muttered, his eyes dark. Like something out of a bad dream. The isolation of the hunting trip, the miles of dense forest separating us from civilization, amplified the sense of dread. The silence of the woods, usually a source of peace, now felt menacing, filled with unseen eyes and unheard whispers. I looked at Chris, his face pale and serious. "We're going back," I said, my voice firm. "We're going back now." I had to know what was going on. I had to know why. And a terrible, icy dread settled in my gut, telling me that what I would discover would be far worse than I could ever imagine. The investigator, a man named Maxwell, had the kind of quiet efficiency that both reassured and terrified me. He didn't waste words, just laid out the facts, cold and hard, like a surgeon presenting a diagnosis. "Your wife," he said, his voice flat, "has been seeing your friend Lawrence for quite some time." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't the revelation itself, not entirely. It was the confirmation of my deepest fears, the validation of the gnawing suspicion that had been eating away at me. Maxwell presented the evidence. Grainy photos of Victoria and Lawrence entering and exiting a discreet motel, text messages filled with coded affection, and even receipts from a small, out-of-the-way restaurant where they'd shared intimate dinners. But that was just the beginning. The real gut punch came when Maxwell started talking about finances. "There have been some irregularities," he said, his eyes narrowing. He showed me a series of bank statements, transfers of significant sums of money from our joint accounts to accounts I didn't recognize. The transactions were carefully masked, but the trail led directly to Lawrence. They had been systematically siphoning off our savings, building a nest egg of their own, funded by my hard work and trust. Then came the genetic analysis. Maxwell had suggested it, a simple precaution, he'd said. But the results were anything but simple. They shattered my world into a million pieces. My youngest two children, the ones I had cradled in my arms, the ones I had taught to ride bikes, the ones I had tucked into bed at night, they weren't mine. The blood drained from my face, and a coldness settled in my bones, a chilling realization that I had been living a lie. The yoga studio, Maxwell said, his voice cutting through the silence. It's not a studio at all. It's an apartment. Rented by Lawrence. He slid a photo across the desk. It showed a nondescript building, the kind you'd pass without a second glance. It was a place where they could meet, away from prying eyes, a sanctuary for their deceit. But the most devastating blow came when Maxwell revealed Margaret's involvement. My mother, the woman who had always been my rock, my confidant, had been complicit in Victoria and Lawrence's betrayal. She had known all along, had even provided cover for them, offering alibis and distractions. The thought of her knowing, watching me, letting me live in blissful ignorance, it was unbearable. I felt like I was drowning, sinking into a sea of betrayal and lies. The world around me seemed to blur, the sounds of the city fading into a distant hum. I was numb, adrift, lost in a labyrinth of deception. Maxwell placed a file on the desk. "I've compiled everything," he said. "Dates, times, locations, financial records, DNA results. Everything you need." He paused, his gaze steady. "What do you want to do now?" I stared at the file, the weight of its contents pressing down on me. I knew I couldn't ignore it, couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. I had to confront them, had to expose their lies, had to reclaim my life. But how? How could I face the people I had trusted, the people who had betrayed me so deeply? Suddenly, a plan began to form in my mind, a way to expose their deception, not with anger or violence, but with calculated precision. I would give them a stage, a platform to reveal their true selves, to expose their own treachery. I would invite them to a dinner party, a seemingly innocent gathering, a final act of deception before the curtain fell. And I knew exactly how I would start. The charity gala was Greenfield's social event of the year, a glittering affair where the town's elite gathered to flaunt their wealth and pretend to care about worthy causes. It was the perfect stage for my grand unveiling. I had spent the past few weeks meticulously planning every detail, ensuring that every piece of evidence was in place, every word carefully chosen. As I stood at the podium, the spotlight blindingly bright, I felt a strange sense of calm. Victoria sat at a table near the front, her smile radiant, completely unaware of the storm about to break. Lawrence, ever the charmer, was by her side, his hand resting casually on her back. My mother, Margaret, was a few tables away, her eyes fixed on me, a flicker of unease in their depths. And then, there was Lawrence's wife, Violet, sitting a few tables over, blissfully unaware of the betrayal beside her. "Tonight," I began, my voice steady, "we celebrate community, philanthropy, and the bonds that unite us." A ripple of polite applause swept through the room. "But tonight," I continued, my voice dropping to a low, resonant tone, "I also want to talk about truth." A hush fell over the room. On the large screen behind me, a series of images began to appear. Grainy photos of Victoria and Lawrence entering the motel, text messages filled with their coded affection, and then, the bank statements, the transfers of money, the irrefutable evidence of their financial deceit. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Victoria's smile vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Lawrence's face flushed crimson, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Violet's eyes widened, and then narrowed, as she stared at the screen. "These," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "are the faces of betrayal." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And these," I gestured to the financial records, "are the fruits of their deception." The room erupted in chaos. Whispers turned into shouts, gasps into cries. Victoria lunged to her feet, her face contorted with rage. "David, what are you doing?" she screamed. Lawrence tried to grab her arm, but she shook him off, her eyes blazing. "I'm exposing the truth," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. "The truth you've so carefully hidden." Margaret, her face pale, rushed towards the stage. "David, stop this madness," she pleaded. "You're destroying everything." "Everything was already destroyed, Mother," I said, my gaze unwavering. Violet stood up, her face a mask of fury. She walked slowly towards Victoria and Lawrence, her eyes fixed on them. "You," she said, her voice trembling. "You did this." Victoria tried to speak, but Violet cut her off with a sharp blow. The sound echoed through the room, silencing the chaos. Violet then turned to Lawrence, her eyes filled with a cold rage, and showed him her deep disgust. "You disgust me," she said before walking out of the gala. The room was a whirlwind of emotions. Some people were horrified, some were fascinated, and some were simply enjoying the spectacle. But through it all, I felt a sense of liberation, a weight lifting from my shoulders. The truth was out, the lies exposed. As I walked off the stage, leaving Victoria, Lawrence, and Margaret to face the consequences of their actions, I knew that my life would never be the same. But I also knew that I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my own narrative, towards building a new life, free from their deceit. I walked out of the gala, and into the cool night air. I knew that the next step was to make sure that they would feel the full weight of their crimes. I would make sure that they would pay for what they had done. The city was a stark contrast to the quiet, predictable life I'd left behind in Greenfield. It was a cacophony of sounds, a kaleidoscope of faces, a relentless energy that pulsed through its veins. I needed that energy, that chaos, to drown out the echoes of betrayal that still lingered in my mind. I found a small, struggling tech startup, a group of young, ambitious minds trying to disrupt the world. They were raw, unpolished, but they had a fire in their eyes, a hunger for success that mirrored my own. I invested, not just money, but my time, my expertise, my relentless drive. I threw myself into the work, using it as a shield against the pain, a way to rebuild my shattered self. Therapy became a lifeline, a place where I could unpack the tangled mess of emotions that had been festering inside me. I learned to confront the anger, the hurt, the lingering sense of betrayal. I learned to forgive myself for trusting the wrong people, for not seeing the signs. I learned to rebuild my self-esteem, brick by painful brick. I rediscovered passions I had long forgotten. Hiking, painting, playing the guitar. I pushed myself physically, running miles, lifting weights, sculpting my body into a testament to my resilience. The city, with its endless opportunities, became my canvas, and I was determined to paint a new life, a life of my own design. Years passed, and the startup flourished, transforming into a powerhouse in the tech industry. I had become a different man, confident, self-assured, a far cry from the betrayed husband who had left Greenfield. My public speaking skills, once rusty and hesitant, were now sharp and persuasive. I could command a room, captivate an audience, inspire action. Then one day, I felt a pull, a sense that it was time to return to Greenfield. Not for revenge, not to gloat, but to offer a new vision, a chance for redemption. I had heard that the town was struggling, that the economic downturn had hit it hard. I saw an opportunity to use my success to make a difference, to breathe new life into the place I had once called home. My return was met with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The town had changed, weathered by hardship, its once vibrant facade now showing signs of wear. But the people, they were the same, their faces etched with the stories of their lives. I proposed a plan to revitalize the town, to attract new businesses, to create jobs, to build a community center that would serve as a hub for social and cultural activities. I spoke with passion, with conviction, my voice resonating with the confidence of a man who had conquered his demons. The townspeople were hesitant at first, wary of my motives. But as they listened to my words, as they saw the sincerity in my eyes, they began to believe. They saw not a vengeful ex-husband, but a man who had transformed himself, a man who wanted to give back. During one of the town hall meetings, I saw Victoria. She was older, her face lined with hardship, her eyes filled with a weariness that spoke of regret. She sat in the back row, her gaze fixed on me, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher in her eyes. It wasn't hatred or anger, but something closer to recognition. After the meeting, she approached me, her voice trembling. "David," she said, her eyes searching mine. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied, my voice calm. "I'm not here for you, Victoria. I'm here for the town." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I understand," she said. "You've changed." "We all have," I said, my gaze sweeping over the room. "But we all have the chance to change again." As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure, a sense that I had finally put the past behind me. But I also felt a stirring of something new, a sense that my journey was far from over. I knew that my next step would be to face my children, and to see if they were ready to hear the truth. The drive to their apartment was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, a mix of anticipation and dread swirling in my gut. My children, now adults, had agreed to meet, to talk. It had been years, years filled with silence, years filled with unanswered questions. The apartment was small, a reflection of their modest lives. They greeted me at the door, their faces a mix of curiosity and guardedness. They were older, changed, but I recognized the familiar spark in their eyes, a spark that had been dimmed by years of uncertainty. "Dad," my eldest Abigail began, her voice hesitant, We have so many questions." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "And I'm here to answer them." We sat around the small kitchen table, the silence heavy with unspoken words. I began, slowly, carefully, recounting the events of the past, the betrayal, the deception, the results of the genetic analysis, the gala. I laid it all out, the raw, unvarnished truth. They listened, their faces growing pale, their eyes filled with a mixture of shock and disbelief. When I finished, a heavy silence settled over the room. "Mom, she never told us," my son James said, his voice barely a whisper. "She couldn't," I replied. "The truth was too painful." "But why?" Abigail asked, her eyes filled with tears. "Why would she do this?" "I don't know," I said, my voice filled with a weariness that came from years of unanswered questions. "Sometimes, people make choices that they regret. Sometimes, they lose their way." We talked for hours, unraveling the tangled threads of our past, piecing together the fragments of our shattered family. They asked about Victoria, about Lawrence, about Margaret. I told them what I knew, the consequences of their actions, the shame, the isolation. "Mom lives a quiet life," I said. "She has very few friends. Lawrence has moved away, and his reputation is ruined. Margaret is in a nursing facility, and rarely has visitors." "And you?" James asked, his eyes searching mine. "How are you?" "I'm good," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "I've built a new life, a good life. I've learned to forgive, to move on." "We want to know you, Dad," Abigail said, her voice filled with emotion. "We want to be a part of your life." "I want that too," I said, my voice thick with emotion. The reconciliation was slow, tentative, but it was real. We spent time together, sharing meals, talking, laughing. We rebuilt the bridge that had been broken, forging a new connection based on honesty and understanding. I focused on my work in Greenfield, building the community center, attracting new businesses, creating opportunities. I used my success to make a positive impact, to build a legacy of integrity and forgiveness. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of the community center, watching the sun set over the town, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of completion. I had faced my demons, confronted my past, and emerged stronger, wiser, more compassionate. My children were by my side, their presence a constant reminder of the power of forgiveness, the resilience of the human spirit. I had built a new life, a life filled with purpose, a life defined not by the betrayal of others, but by the strength of my own character. The town of Greenfield had become a symbol of my transformation, a testament to the power of second chances. And as I looked out over the town, I knew that my journey was far from over. There were still lives to touch, dreams to fulfill, and a legacy to build. I would continue to move forward, guided by the lessons of the past, fueled by the hope of the future. I had found my closure, and I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life.